My name is Vanessa. I'm 28 years old, and what I'm about to share with you is something I've never told anyone before. It's a story about betrayal, family, lies, and ultimately, revenge. Not the kind you see in movies, not loud or violent, but cold, calculated, and silent. The kind that leaves you at peace, while the other person is left with nothing but the echoes of their own deceit. I've always been the quiet one, the observer. Growing up, I wasn't the boisterous child who commanded attention, nor the mischievous one who stirred up trouble. I preferred books to parties, quiet thoughts to loud debates. Independence wasn't a choice for me, it was simply how I was wired. Because of that nature, I've also never been someone who actively sought revenge. The very word felt heavy, laden with a bitterness I recoiled from. My philosophy was always to let things go, to find peace in moving forward. I believed in karma, in the universe balancing its own scales. I truly did. My family, on the surface, was everything. My father, Marcus, a kind, somewhat naive history professor. My mother, Eleanor, the pragmatic anchor. And then there was Clara, my older sister by 3 years. Clara was the sun to my moon, the extrovert, the life of every party. She sparkled. Everyone loved Clara, and I, her quiet, admiring younger sister, loved her most of all. We lived in a sprawling old house, inherited from our grandparents, filled with laughter and the scent of my mother's baking. Holidays were grand affairs, full of cousins, aunts, and uncles. We weren't wealthy, but we were rich in connection. Or so I believed. I genuinely thought we were one of those rare, truly close-knit families, a fortress against the world. But then, the cracks began to show. Small, hairline fractures at first, barely perceptible to the casual eye. A hushed conversation ending abruptly when I entered the room. A sudden chill in my mother's gaze, a distant air about my father. I tried to dismiss them, but the unease lingered, a low thrum beneath the surface. I was starting to realize that the fortress I believed in was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. There was a dark secret festering at its heart, and it was about to consume everything I thought I knew. The beginning of the end, as I now call it, started subtly, a slow poisoning of what I held dearest. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic explosion, but a gradual erosion of trust, cloaked in comforting lies and wrapped in the insidious whispers of gaslighting. Our grandmother, my father's mother, was the true matriarch of our family, a formidable woman with a sharp wit and an even sharper business mind. She had built a small but successful artisanal furniture business from scratch, a legacy she guarded fiercely. When she passed away 2 years ago, it hit us all hard. Grandma Clara had been my confidant, the one who truly understood my quiet nature. Her will was clear, or so we thought. The family home went to my father. Her business, Alara's heirlooms, was to be split equally between Clara and me. We had both spent summers working there, learning the ropes. Clara with her charm, effortlessly selling, me, meticulously handling the finances. It seemed a fair distribution. At first, Clara and I were a team. The business was thriving, and our bond felt stronger than ever. Then, Clara started changing. It began with small things. She'd dismiss my suggestions, claiming her gut feeling was better. Financial reports I meticulously prepared would be glanced at, then set aside. Her phone calls became hushed, her meetings increasingly private. When I asked, she'd wave it off with a dismissive hand, a bright, disarming smile. Just a new supplier, V. Nothing to worry your pretty little head about. My pretty little head. The phrase, once endearing, now felt condescending, a subtle way to infantilize me. The true betrayal, however, centered around a particular piece of the inheritance. Grandma Clara had always had a passion for antique jewelry. Hidden away in a safety deposit box, she had a collection of rare, unappraised pieces. Her will stated this collection was to be appraised and sold, with the proceeds divided equally between Clara and me, specifically for our future financial independence. It was a substantial sum. Clara had been the one to accompany my father to the bank to retrieve the collection as I was away. When I returned, she told me that the collection had been appraised for far less than we'd anticipated, just enough for a modest down payment on something small. She showed me a hurried, generic appraisal document from a firm I'd never heard of. My gut screamed, but Clara's conviction, her almost theatrical disappointment, was convincing. "It's a shame, V," she'd sighed, and it began the gaslighting. When I timidly suggested a second opinion, her eyes narrowed. "Are you calling me a liar, Vanessa? Are you saying I'd cheat you out of your share?" Her voice was laced with hurt, her eyes welling up. My father gently chastised me. "Clara's right, sweetie. She went through all the trouble. Why question her?" I backed down, ashamed of my momentary suspicion. I was being paranoid, wasn't I? She was my sister, my family. Over the next few months, Clara began to systematically isolate me. At family gatherings, she'd monopolize conversations, subtly twisting narratives. If I brought up business, she'd quickly change the subject. Or worse, make a joke at my expense about my obsessive spreadsheets. My uncle started looking at me with a strange pity. My aunts, who used to confide in me, now seemed distant, their smiles strained. When I tried to reach out, I was met with vague platitudes or swift topic changes. "You seem a little stressed, Vanessa," my mother would say. "Clara's got everything under control." "Your sister is very dedicated," my father added, a hint of admiration absent when he spoke of me. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I imagining this? The seeds of doubt Clara had planted were flourishing, choking out my self-confidence. The business itself started to suffer. Orders were delayed, materials were mismanaged, and our once stellar reputation began to fray. When I confronted Clara, armed with data and customer complaints, she erupted. "You're always so negative, Vanessa. Can't you see I'm trying my best? This business is hard work, and you're just making it harder with your constant nitpicking." She painted me as the ungrateful, unsupportive partner. My father, hearing her impassioned plea, sided with her. "Give Clara a break, Vanessa." It was a slow burn, a creeping numbness that began to settle over my life. I started to believe their narrative. Perhaps I was too sensitive. I retreated further, the quiet observer now just quiet, lost in a fog of self-doubt. My dreams for Ilara's heirlooms withered. I watched helplessly as the business slowly crumbled under Clara's supposed management. One particularly bleak evening, nearly a year after Grandma Ilara's passing, I was helping my father sort through some old boxes in the attic. Deep in a forgotten trunk, beneath a pile of musty old academic journals, I stumbled upon a small, leather-bound diary. Tucked within its brittle pages, near the very end, was a loose, folded sheet of paper. It was a letter, addressed to my father, in Grandma Ilara's distinctive, elegant script. My heart pounded as I unfolded it. It was a detailed addendum to her will, written shortly before her death, but never formally notarized. In it, she spoke of her concerns about Clara's financial recklessness and her tendency to be easily swayed. She expressed a desire for the antique jewelry collection to be appraised by a specific, trusted expert, a renowned gemologist named Dr. Evelyn Reed, whose contact information was meticulously listed. More damningly, the letter outlined a contingency. If Clara were ever found to have willfully misrepresented the value, or handled the sale of the collection without joint agreement and transparent appraisal, then my share of the business, Ilara's heirlooms, would increase to 75%, and a separate, smaller trust would be established for Clara under strict conditions. This was it, the missing piece, the proof. My hands trembled as I read the contact details for Dr. Evelyn Reed. The appraisal Clara had shown me was from Gemstone Valuations, Inc., clearly not Dr. Reed. The pieces clicked into place. Clara hadn't just minimized the value. She had orchestrated a fraudulent appraisal, likely siphoning off the significant difference for herself. The contingency in the letter, while not legally binding, revealed Grandma's deep-seated doubts about Clara, doubts she had successfully hidden from us all. It was a mother's desperate attempt to protect one child from another, a failsafe that was never activated. The anger hit me then, a cold, searing wave that swept away the fog of sadness and self-doubt. This was a quiet, profound fury, a settled determination. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I had been systematically betrayed, gaslit, and isolated by my own sister, with my parents unknowingly acting as her unwitting accomplices. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the letter clutched in my hand. The quiet, independent part of me, the one that usually recoiled from conflict, was gone. In its place was a steely resolve. Revenge wasn't about bitterness anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming what was stolen, not just the money or the business, but my sanity, my dignity, and the legacy of a woman I adored. I began my quiet plotting. The first step was to discreetly confirm the truth about the jewelry appraisal. I contacted Dr. Evelyn Reed. She was a gracious, elderly woman, sharp as a tack. When I explained my situation, she confirmed that she had indeed appraised a substantial collection of antique jewelry for a Marcus Thorne, my father, approximately a year and a half ago. She had sent a detailed, certified appraisal report directly to him. The value? Over 3 times what Clara had claimed. Dr. Reed even offered to send me a duplicate of the original report. This was the smoking gun. Clara had intercepted the genuine appraisal, replaced it with a fake, and pocketed a fortune, all while convincing my father and me that the collection was nearly worthless. The betrayal was deeper, colder than I had even imagined. My father, bless his trusting heart, had likely never even looked closely at the appraisal report Clara gave him, simply taking her word for it. Next, I needed to understand the true state of Alara's heirlooms. While Clara had been the face, I had retained access to some digital accounts. I leveraged my knowledge of old passwords and digital backdoors I had set up, meticulously sifting through the company's online banking, supplier accounts, and sales records. What I found was horrifying. Clara hadn't just been mismanaging. She had been systematically embezzling funds, funneling profits into shell companies, and racking up massive debts under the business's name. She was running Alara's heirlooms into the ground, preparing it for an inevitable collapse, after which she would presumably walk away with her stolen jewelry money, leaving me and the family to deal with the wreckage and debt. My anger solidified into ice. This wasn't just a sisterly squabble. This was a calculated, criminal act. And she had done it with a smile, while gaslighting me into believing I was the problem. I started building my case, silently, methodically. I documented everything. Screenshots of financial transfers, copies of the genuine appraisal and Clara's fake one, email exchanges where she dismissed my concerns, customer complaints, and records of her increasingly erratic business decisions. I created a timeline, cross-referencing dates, amounts, and conversations. Every evening, after everyone else was asleep, I would sit at my desk poring over the evidence. My mind a whirl of calculations and strategies. The quiet observer was now a meticulous detective, driven by a quiet, burning fire. The isolation she had imposed on me, the way she had alienated me from the family, now ironically became my greatest asset. No one was watching me closely. They had dismissed me as the stressed, obsessive sister, leaving me free to work in the shadows, unnoticed, underestimated. They thought they had rendered me powerless. They were wrong. They had merely made me invisible. The most painful part was seeing my parents caught in her web. My father, so trusting, so proud of Clara. My mother, so practical, yet seemingly blind to the obvious red flags. They had implicitly supported Clara's narrative, believing their dedicated older daughter. How could I expose Clara without destroying my parents in the process? This was the ethical tightrope I had to walk. My revenge needed to be precise, targeting Clara, and allowing my parents to see the truth without feeling like I was attacking them. The slow burn had ignited a different kind of fire in me. Not destructive, but transformative. It had peeled away the layers of the naive girl who trusted blindly, revealing a core of resilience and a strategic mind I never knew I possessed. I wasn't the kind of person who sought revenge, no, but I was the kind of person who sought truth and justice. And sometimes those pursuits led to paths less traveled, paths that necessitated a very cold, very calculated revenge. My revenge plan wasn't born out of a sudden outburst of rage, but from weeks of meticulous planning, late-night strategizing, and a cold, hard assessment of all the facts. It was a chess game, and Clara, unknowingly, had just made her final, fatal move. My goal wasn't just to reclaim what was mine. It was to expose Clara for who she truly was, to strip away her carefully constructed facade without resorting to violence or illegality, and to ensure she could never do this to anyone else again. The perfect opportunity presented itself in the form of my cousin Emily's wedding. Emily was my father's niece, a sweet, unsuspecting girl whose wedding was set to be the biggest family gathering of the year. Every aunt, uncle, and distant cousin would be there. Clara, naturally, was in the bridal party, basking in the spotlight. It was the ideal stage. My plan had 3 interwoven components: financial reclamation, public revelation, and familial re-education. First, the financial reclamation. With Dr. Evelyn Reed's certified appraisal in hand, detailing the true value and the pieces in the collection, I consulted with a family friend who was a probate lawyer, Mr. Davies. He was shocked by what I presented. The original will stipulated an equal split of the appraised value, and Clara's fraudulent appraisal constituted clear grounds for legal action. I had already discreetly confirmed through my network of antique dealers that several of the more prominent pieces from Grandma Ilara's collection had recently appeared on the market, sold by a shell company Clara had set up. This was irrefutable proof she had sold them below market value through illegitimate channels, pocketing the difference. Armed with the genuine appraisal, the sales records, and the documents proving Clara's ownership of the shell company, I sent a formal but seemingly innocent letter from Mr. Davies' office to Clara, requesting clarification on the discrepancies regarding the valuation and sale of the inherited jewelry collection. The letter was politely worded, but it contained enough veiled legal language and references to specific sales dates to make her sweat. Her response was predictable: outrage, denial, and a furious phone call to my father, painting me as vindictive and obsessed. But I knew the letter had hit its mark. While this was happening, I moved on the business. My years of managing the financials for Ilara's heirlooms meant I knew every supplier, every client, every hidden asset. Clara had amassed significant debt, but she had also quietly funneled a surprising amount of the business's liquid assets into various high-risk investments, attempting to multiply her ill-gotten gains. Most were failing, but a few still held value. Working with Mr. Davies, I initiated a quiet forensic audit of Ilara's heirlooms. This was tricky. As a co-owner, I had the right to request this, but Clara was doing everything to obstruct. Fortunately, my meticulous record-keeping saved me. I provided the auditors with a treasure trove of financial discrepancies I had already uncovered. The audit uncovered the shell companies, the false invoices, and the direct transfers to Clara's personal accounts. It also revealed a critical detail. Clara had signed off on a business loan, using the company's intellectual property and remaining assets as collateral, intending to default and let the business crumble, clearing her path to escape with her illicit gains from the jewelry. Here was my opening. The loan agreement, signed by Clara, had a clause that allowed the other partner, me, to assume full control if the primary signatory was found to have engaged in gross financial misconduct. The audit provided the evidence. I worked with Mr. Davies to prepare a legal notice to Clara, demanding her immediate divestment and a full transfer of her shares, citing the gross financial misconduct clause, and attaching key audit findings. The notice also stipulated that if she failed to comply, I would initiate criminal proceedings for embezzlement and fraud, alongside the civil suit for the jewelry. This was the sledgehammer. The public revelation was the psychological component, designed to dismantle Clara's carefully crafted image and turn the family's perception. It had to be subtle, impactful, and undeniable. The wedding reception was held at a beautiful country club. Clara, resplendent in her bridesmaid's dress, was holding court near the dessert table, charming everyone. My parents, looking proud, watched her. I arrived calmly, greeting people, acting as if nothing was amiss. My demeanor was serene. My strategy was simple: information dissemination, not confrontation. I had prepared a small, elegant folder. Inside were 3 key documents: Dr. Evelyn Reed's actual jewelry appraisal, the fake appraisal Clara had presented, and a 1-page, simplified summary of the forensic audit findings for Alara's heirlooms, highlighting the systematic embezzlement and the shell companies. Crucially, it included the clause from the business loan agreement that transferred control due to gross financial misconduct. I chose my targets carefully. Not my parents, not yet. My mother's eldest sister, Aunt Beatrice, the family gossip queen, but also deeply loyal. My father's brother, Uncle Robert, a retired businessman, astute and fair-minded, highly respected for his integrity. They were the unofficial pillars of the family's social order. I approached Aunt Beatrice first, during a lull in the music. "Aunt B," I began, "I wanted to apologize. I know I've been distant. There's been a lot going on with Grandma Alara's business, and, well, it's been incredibly stressful." Aunt Beatrice's eyes softened. "Oh, darling, we understand. Clara told us you've been struggling a bit. She's been so worried about you." This was my cue. "She has been, hasn't she?" I said, with just the right touch of wistful irony. "It's just, some things have come—" "I don't know, Aunt B," I said, feigning a sigh. "It's all very confusing. And the business? Well, the auditors have found some deeply troubling things. I just hope Clara is okay. It's a lot for one person to manage." I then subtly slid the 1-page summary of the audit findings into her hand. "This is just a brief overview. I truly hope it's all just a misunderstanding." I deliberately framed it as my concern for Clara, a plea for understanding, rather than an accusation. This made it harder for her to dismiss as my vindictiveness. Aunt Beatrice, ever the gossip conduit, looked at me with a newfound intensity. I see. Thank you for sharing this, Vanessa." Her eyes darted towards Clara. I knew the seed was planted. Within minutes, I saw her whispering furiously to her sister, my other aunt. Next, I found Uncle Robert. He was a man of facts and figures. I used a similar approach, albeit more direct, focusing on the business. "Uncle Robert, could I get your advice on something? You're so good with business matters. Alara's heirlooms, it's been struggling, and I've had an audit done. There are some rather alarming discrepancies." I showed him the real and fake appraisals, explaining the context calmly. Then I presented the audit summary. Unlike Aunt Beatrice, Uncle Robert didn't gasp. He frowned, his brow furrowed in concentration, as he meticulously read every line. His silence was far more potent than any exclamation. When he finished, he looked up, his gaze steady, devoid of pity, filled with a grim understanding. "Vanessa," he said, his voice low, "this is serious, very serious." "I know," I replied, my voice tinged with genuine sorrow. "I just don't know what to do. Clara, she's been under so much pressure. I just hope we can resolve this without further trouble." Again the faint concern, the hint of underlying severity. Over the next hour, I observed. Aunt Beatrice moved from one relative to another, her hushed whispers and darting glances unmistakable. Uncle Robert, a man of action, quietly pulled my father aside, the audit summary in his hand. I saw my father's face, usually so open, contort in confusion, then shock, then a profound sadness. "Clara, too caught up in her moment of glory, initially noticed nothing. But gradually, she must have felt the shift in the room. The smiles directed at her seemed a little less genuine, the conversations a little shorter. People started looking at her with a new, scrutinizing gaze. She was no longer the sparkling center of attention, but an object of quiet, speculative whispers. This was the first part of the public revelation. It wasn't me shouting accusations. It was the undeniable truth presented by others, slowly spreading through the family like wildfire. The familial re-education was crucial for my parents. They were the most vulnerable, deeply invested in Clara's perceived goodness. I couldn't shatter their world. I had to guide them gently to the truth. As the whispers spread, my father eventually found me. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "Vanessa," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "What is Uncle Robert talking about? This audit, the jewelry appraisals, what is going on?" I knew this moment would come. I took him aside to a quiet corner. "Dad," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I didn't want to do this. I tried to resolve it quietly, directly with Clara. But she wouldn't listen. She's been misleading us, Dad, for a long time. I didn't present it as Clara is a monster. I presented it as Clara needs help, and she's gotten us all tangled in her mess." I laid out the evidence, step by step, gently, factually. I showed him Dr. Reed's appraisal again, the official one sent to him. I showed him the fake one. She intercepted it, Dad. She replaced it, and she sold the jewelry for a fortune, telling us it was worthless. His face crumpled. Then I went into the business. "Dad, the business is in serious trouble. Clara has been embezzling, setting up shell companies. She was planning to let it collapse, leaving us with all the debt. Grandma's legacy. It was being destroyed." I showed him the specific entries, the fraudulent transfers. His initial reaction was denial, a desperate attempt to defend his golden child. "No, Vanessa, Clara wouldn't." "Dad," I interrupted, my voice cracking slightly. "Look at the documents. These are bank statements. These are certified appraisals. This is a forensic audit. It's all here. I've suffered in silence for a year, watching her do this, being gaslit into believing I was the problem, while she systematically took everything. My vulnerability was genuine now, not feigned. The pain was real." He sat down heavily, looking utterly defeated. He finally accepted the undeniable evidence. His silence was deafening. My mother joined us, having heard fragmented whispers, her face a mask of concern. I repeated the information, calmly, showing her the documents too. My mother, the pragmatic one, grasped the financial implications quickly. The scale of the deceit, the audacity of it, finally hit them. The beloved daughter, the sparkling Clara, was a fraud. The final element of the familial re-education was the legal notice from Mr. Davies, which I ensured was delivered to Clara the following Monday, after the wedding. This notice, demanding her divestment from Alara's heirlooms and referencing the audit and potential criminal charges, was the absolute proof that I wasn't just vindictive or obsessed. It was a serious legal threat, showing that I had legitimate grounds. The aftermath of the wedding was a whirlwind. Clara, blindsided by the sudden shift in family dynamics and the legal notice, initially tried to deny everything. She called me, screaming, accusing me of ruining her life, of being jealous. But the family, armed with the information, wasn't so easily swayed anymore. Uncle Robert, in particular, became an unexpected ally, his business acumen allowing him to dissect Clara's weak defenses. Aunt Beatrice made sure no one was left in the dark about the details of the discrepancies. My father, deeply hurt and disillusioned, began to see the patterns of manipulation he had unknowingly fallen victim to. My mother, practical to the core, started demanding explanations from Clara regarding the business. The narrative Clara had so carefully woven around herself, portraying me as unstable and her as the hardworking victim, unraveled completely. "Clara, facing overwhelming evidence and the sudden ostracization of her family, eventually backed down. She signed the divestment papers for Alara's heirlooms. The threat of criminal charges, the immense debt she had accrued for the business, and the shame of being exposed to the entire family proved too much. She couldn't deny the bank statements, the audit, and Dr. Reed's genuine appraisal. Regarding the jewelry money, Mr. Davies worked out a settlement. While a civil suit would have been a sure win, it would have been messy. Instead, Clara, desperate to avoid public prosecution and further family humiliation, agreed to repay the full difference of the jewelry appraisal, plus interest, over a period of 2 years, with significant penalties if she defaulted. It was a compromise, but it secured the financial reclamation without tearing the family completely apart through a public trial. The revenge was complete. It was cold, calculated, and deeply satisfying. It wasn't about violence or overt confrontation. It was about truth, about legal mechanisms, and about carefully turning the narrative on its head. I hadn't destroyed Clara's life, but I had stripped her of her power, her ill-gotten gains, and her illusion of control. And crucially, I had reclaimed what was stolen and protected my grandmother's legacy. It's been 2 years since Emily's wedding, since the quiet detonation of my revenge. 2 years since I systematically dismantled the lies, brick by painful brick, that my own sister had built around me, around us. The dust has settled, but the landscape is irrevocably altered. I sit now in what used to be my grandmother's study, the quietest room in the old house. It's late, and the only sound is the gentle hum of the antique grandfather clock in the hall. Lara's heirlooms is not just solvent again, it's thriving. With the embezzled funds recovered and Clara's disastrous management purged, I restructured the business, focusing on sustainable practices and ethical sourcing, just as Grandma Alara would have wanted. It's my full-time work now, and it brings me a profound sense of purpose. It's not just a business, it's a living testament to a woman I loved, a legacy I fought to protect. Do I feel proud? No. Not in the way you might expect. Pride feels too triumphant, too boastful for what was, at its core, a deeply sorrowful undertaking. There's no glory in having to expose your own flesh and blood. There's no victory parade after untangling a web of familial deceit. But I am at peace. A deep, quiet, unshakable peace. It's the peace that comes from clarity, from finally seeing the world as it is, not as you desperately wish it to be. The gaslighting, the constant doubt, the feeling of being insane, that has evaporated. My mind is clear, my footing firm. I no longer question my perceptions or my sanity. That, more than any financial gain or public vindication, is the greatest gift this journey has given me. Clara, she's different now. The sparkle is gone. She repaid the jewelry money, slowly, painfully, over the agreed-upon period. She's moved out of town, works a mundane job, and rarely contacts the family. Her calls to our parents are infrequent and strained. The familial re-education, as I called it, worked. My parents were devastated, yes, but they slowly, painfully, came to terms with the truth. It was a shattering experience for them, realizing the depth of their favored daughter's deceit, but it also brought a quiet reconciliation between us. They saw what I had endured, and the unwavering support they gave Clara was replaced by a hesitant, then firm, understanding of my actions. They now see Clara as a person who needs to confront her issues, rather than one to be unconditionally defended. I am not alone. My parents, though wounded, are closer to me than ever before. The quiet observer has finally shown them her strength, her resilience. My cousin Emily, whose wedding became the unwitting backdrop for my silent revolution, reached out to me shortly after, having heard the whispers and seen the family's shift. She was gentle, understanding, and has become a true confidant, one of the few people with whom I can truly be myself. I didn't start a new life in a new city. I simply started a fresh life within the one I already had. The old house, once a fortress of illusion, is now a sanctuary of truth. I still find solace in books, But now, the stories I read resonate with a different kind of wisdom, born from lived experience. Revenge didn't fix the past. It couldn't erase the years of doubt, the sting of betrayal, or the profound sadness of losing the sister I thought I had. But it gave me the closure they never thought I'd get.